resilience, behavior change, and socio-emotional problems. Well-being and resilience, and behavior change and socio-emotional programs. The moderators of this program is myself. Linda, please come here. Is myself, Dr. Ndamburi, and Madam Victoria from ICMA. We will be moderating this afternoon session. Our facilitators are Dr. Roy Mayenga from Makerere University. We will be doing it through a virtual presentation. And then Ms. Rindia Joki, who is representing the Director, Quality Assurance in the Ministry of Education. And then we have Madam Beatrice Wanjiko Jane, the Executive Director, Zana Africa Program. Ladies and gentlemen, the question of wellness and resilience are very critical, particularly in the education family, because of the kind of issues that we are facing. Like in the year 2023, we had several of our teachers hanging themselves. We had several of our cases that are attending rehab because of drug and substance abuse and other family-related disorders that are there. And therefore, this afternoon, we will be able to get the feedback from our facilitators and to give us some enlightenment on the issues of well-being and resilience. And we are very grateful to say UNESCO ICBA has facilitated the Teacher Service Commission to come up a guideline on teacher wellness and psychosocial support, which is getting finalized, and they have helped us train our county directors so that they can be able to handle the issues of wellness. And Teacher Service Commission has gone ahead and opened a wellness center where teachers can be able to come and they go through different aspects of wellness. And then we are working with the Shiromo group of hospitals so that the ones that require to be taken for rehabilitation are also taken for rehab, and they can now be reinstated back to the teaching and learning process in our country. And therefore, I want to check, is he online? Is Dr. Mayenga online? Not yet. Therefore, we can start with, okay.
Hello?
Yes?
Yes. So this is Julius. I'm a colleague to Dr. Mayenga.
Beautiful.
He was scheduled to present in the morning, and we're in the middle of the semester exam, so he requested me to make the presentation, so I'm happy to make it on his behalf.
Please go ahead.
So let me just get into the slides, and I'm going to project from my end. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so are you able to see the slides?
Make them in the PowerPoint mode, in the projection mode.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to turn on my video due to the bandwidth here. But Roy, who's my director, was supposed to make this presentation, but him and I, plus other colleagues here at Makerere, at the Resilient African Network, are leading this work. And in terms of establishing an Africa Education System Resilience Observatory, with funding from IDRC DPP. So we are grateful to the DPP team for providing the resources to get into this work. So apologies, I dropped off. I don't know at what point I dropped off. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, as I was saying that in terms of framing this, COVID-19 was an eye-opener, and in terms of education systems integrating resilience in development, but also so that we can withstand and withstand disruptions, which seem to be here to stay with us, but which might even increase in terms of number, frequency, also in terms of types. So the Raise Zero program is set out to examine, when we talk about education system resilience, what does it mean to colleagues in Kenya? But also, most importantly, how is it practiced within these countries across the 42 GDPE Africa partner countries? So this is what we are set out to do. What does ESR mean? But also, most importantly, how is it practiced? And we don't get into the trap whereby issues of ESR or issues of resilience become another buzzword. So we really want to be intentional in terms of defining it, but also going forward, how the countries practice ESR so that they are able to withstand different shocks and stressors. So this map shows how our work is organized. It's mainly administrative. This is how we are set out laboratory, where we have these unknowns in the east side of the continent, in the south, in the middle, Central Africa, but also on the west side of Africa. And this covers the KICS hubs, the Africa 19 and as well as Africa 21. And I know today we are speaking to Africa 21 through the Kenya country. So our approach to this work is three-pronged. We set out to do a context analysis at the start of our work. We've been on to this work for about 1.5 years, and we have an additional year to go. And the findings that I'm going to highlight will be coming in from the desk reviews, which we did for all the 42 countries, but I'll be picking out the insights for Kenya. We've also conducted formative assessments in terms of qualitative interviews with 8 countries, and we have those spotlight findings coming up. And also we were introduced to a new methodology of research, which is called foresight analysis, where we try to look into the future and we explore what could be coming into our system in terms of disruptions. So it is not predicting, but it's mainly to explore, so that as planners, as policymakers, we are able to look forward, see what might befall the education system in Kenya. So we also have these reports coming out in the next few months. So in terms of conceptualizing ESR, I would say that ESR, it looks different depending on where you stand. It's pretty much like an elephant. And for Kenya, this aspect of education system resilience is seen through a lens of emergency management and adaptive capacity, which have been shaped especially by COVID-19. When we looked into the policy documents for Kenya and also the published literature, we found that this terminology of education system resilience has cropped up more following the COVID-19 pandemic, but also it follows the other disasters like from climate change. They have also led to inclusion of this terminology of ESR within your documents. I will not spend a lot of time on this because I think this is known to us. These are some of the disruptions that Kenya faces. Kenya, we know that you have a lot of arid and semi-arid lands, and where you have droughts in northern part of Kenya, but also on the coastal side, we know that floods keep disrupting education. The health effects like COVID-19 affected more than 18 million learners in Kenya, with lots of dropouts and lots of social emotional issues, both among the learners, but also among the teachers and other stakeholders. And of course, we know that the conflict and insecurity, whether it's from Al-Shabaab attacks, from cattle rustling, these keep on eroding the gains within the education system, as well as the economic pressures, whether this is at a household or it is at an education system level. These keep on eroding at the gains. So here we are seeing that Kenya, like all countries, are hit by crisis of disruptions. And these disruptions are not a singular, but it's a multitude. So if we are to go in and address issues of ESR, we have to look at it as a polycrisis where we are working. And when we turn now to the aspects of practices of education system resilience, and this we also had in the morning, but I think maybe perhaps also yesterday you did hear, that the policy environment in Kenya is very, very fertile with lots of policies and legal documents. The Constitution for Kenya, the Basic Education Act, the Children Act, but also moving on to innovative reforms like the CBC, which you put in place, the free primary education, the Tuseme initiative, which I was part of when we were evaluating it, together with colleagues at University of Nairobi, are all efforts which look into building resilience. But also, we know that there are policies that are targeting crises, like the policy framework for nomadic education, education in emergence. At least you've been intentional in terms of ensuring that no learner is left behind. Whether it's a conflict situation, you can at least do a programming for those learners so that they get back to school, including the refugee communities or learners that come in, whether from Somalia or Ethiopia. There's that environment to still put them back into school. But most important to highlight here is the Education Strategic Plan 2023 to 2027, which has been intentional in terms of mainstreaming or bringing in the issue of resilience. There is that goal within the policy, which looks at mainstreaming cross-cutting temporary issues, and these include emergencies, climate change, but also looking into big data. So you've been already, from a policy perspective, these have been prioritized within that strategic document, which guides the education system for the next 5 years or so. But also, okay, I'll try to fit in here. But also, and also there are provisions of data access and also cyber crime for children. The GPE KICS has an emerging framework in terms of understanding ESR issues, and it looks at issues like strengthening activities that look at strengthening the education system. And here for Kenya, we see that you have quite a lot of these activities, whether it's about piloting digital learning systems, your education emergence, your education management information system, DRR, the teacher capacity building that I've been hearing about since morning, but also in terms of curriculum. You are putting in aspects of like peace education into the curriculum, but also climate change is being integrated into the Kenya curriculum so that learners and teachers are aware of these issues, but also they can practice them, whether it's about tree planting and etc. So we see those aspects coming out. So this is, I think, my second last slide, where we also try to look into issues of gender, equity, and social inclusion. And part of your policy is bringing these aspects, whether it's about re-entry programs for adolescent mothers so that they come back to school, whether it's about safety nets for some communities through school feeding, capitation grants, or whether it's about the pastoral communities in terms of making sure that at least even those learners are able to access education within their environment. So what does this mean? What do these findings mean to us? It means that ESR is still emerging as a terminology for you in Kenya, but also across, but also it means that we have to integrate it into all our programs, and not only in the education sector, like on that last bullet, like how do you work with other sectors, whether it's health and other ministries, because we know that a disaster in health can quickly affect learners within the education system. So this means that as we go forward, we need to continue, whether we are developing a micro plan or a macro plan, we need to consider issues of education system resilience so that the system is prepared to meet these shocks, but also to address them through recovery, response, or any other aspects. So thank you so much for having us, and we have more information on our site where the observatory is hosted, but also we have more details on this presentation through that blog. So thank you so much, and back to you, Chair.
In Kenya's arid and semi-arid lands, learning is shaped by more than lessons. Families navigate economic pressure, climate shocks, and limited access to services. As children grow into adolescence, many lack clear information about their changing bodies, their health, their rights, and their futures. Gender expectations shape daily life, alongside poverty, insecurity, and unequal opportunities. All of this enters the classroom with every learner, every day.
Learner well-being influences very many things. One, participation, and participation in education unity means from enrollment, retention, up to completion. It also affects learning outcomes. Learner well-being. What do we mean by learner well-being? How safe does a child feel when they're in school? Learner well-being, their socio-emotional learning and mental health challenges that we are facing now more than ever before. And little do we know what to do with that. Resilience is critical for continuity of education during crisis and transitions. I do not know whether we pay a lot of attention when we talk about transitions and what learners feel like moving from grade 9 to grade 10, moving from a primary school setup to going to grade 10, a school that has bigger children, bigger different things, and the issues of socio-emotional learning and how they deal with that sort of crisis happens. Few of us think about what that would mean to learners. Most of us, as we keep thinking about why are you here? What grade did you get? Other than who is the person who is going to that school and what is happening in their minds, in their mental abilities. And that is what student well-being is all about. So understanding student well-being includes physical well-being. How comfortable, how healthy are they? What do they require to remain physically well? mental and emotional well-being. Do the teachers understand the emotional status of the learner? Is there anybody who is concerned about the mental health, the social, emotional levels of these learners? Or are we just talking about textbooks, and more textbooks? STEM, social studies, and all those things. Are we thinking about the learner in this child? Social and behavioral well-being. Why is the child behaving in a certain way? Why are learners dissenting what the rules of the schools are? Are the teachers and the boards of management willing to face that learner who is saying, we don't want this because of this? Right now we are having many schools, there's a lot of unrest, even in this term. Who is catering that? Who is thinking about that? The social and behavioral well-being, safety and protection. We are seeing increasingly learners getting lost on their way to school and out of school. Who is responsible? These are questions. I'm here to throw questions at us. We don't have answers. I think that's what this conversation is about, that we need to go beyond books. We need to go beyond finances that we are hearing since morning, how to fund. Who are we funding? The issues of positive school climate. And you know, school climate has the safety, the teacher, the people, you know, the 5 Ps. When we talk about the school climate, how is the school climate? Who is bothered with it? When you take your child to school, does it bother you how your child will be the whole day? Or Teacher Mary is the answer to everything? And when your learner comes home and they're saying, Mommy, I don't want to go back to that school, does it bother you that they could actually be having a point as to why they don't want to go back to that school? So positive school climate and supportive relationships. Who is the teacher? Who is the learner support? Is it peer to peer? Is it teacher to peer? Who is the learner? Where is the support in schools? As I said, I don't have answers. I'm just throwing questions to us. Why does student well-being matter? It matters because it improves learner engagement, and academic achievement will come out of student well-being. If the learner is not well in all those aspects I have stated, their engagement in class, their engagement with their peers will be negative. Their academic achievement will come down. Therefore, can we put the money where it matters? Reduced absenteeism and dropout. Most of the dropouts and absenteeism does not come out of poor performance. Poor performance is contributed by all this lack of well-being. Better behavior in a school climate. Why it is important, why it matters, is that it will have stronger coping and resilience skills. If we have learners who are healthy in all manner, they will have stronger coping mechanisms. And of course, it will enhance equity and inclusion. So what are the challenges that are facing schools today and the teacher every day? One, mental health concerns among learners. When a teacher goes to class and they find a child who is crying, and they do not have capacity to know why this learner is so uncomfortable, they do not know how to deal with that, they do not know the referral mechanisms, whether it's a young child, whether it is a TTC trainee with madam there, whether it is a secondary school learner, what abilities does the teacher have when it comes to issues of mental health concerns? Bullying and cyberbullying. The government of Kenya, Ministry of Education, has stringent rules of anti-bullying. But have we ever wanted to know why the bully? Am I bullying because I was bullied? Is it a culture? Is it something that we can deal with? Is it something we need to think about? Cyberbullying. We have realized that schools these days have internet. Many people here are longing for every school to be connected to internet. But we are not asking ourselves, at the back of that, what is it going to bring? We have seen cyberbullying in schools, computer laboratories, but the teachers do not know how to stop it. We have seen schools that are burning because they have communicated through emails across the fence. Let us burn our school and you burn your school. And all those are cyberbullying. They're issues of technology, drug and substance abuse. Recently, during the conference, we were given a talk by NACADA. And NACADA told us these days there are even so many products. Mr. Thamburi, I saw you were so worried about that day when the NACADA lady said they're actually condoms made out of bangi that the learners are using. And they're also injecting themselves with bangi products. And we are sitting pretty in boardrooms when all hell is breaking loose with the children. Drug and substance abuse has taken a new angle altogether. Teenage pregnancies and child protection concerns, poverty, displacement, and emergencies, child abuse. I can pause there, child abuse. At home, on the way to school, and in school. We are not doing enough. Online safety risks. I don't need to say that much. All parents think how to keep a child quiet is to give them a phone. Yes. Kidnapping and disappearance of children to and from school. Policy priorities, strengthening learner protection and safeguarding, important. Promoting mental health and psychosocial support, important. Enhancing guidance and counseling services, including coming up with counselors who are not teachers. Mainstreaming socio-emotional learning. That is critical. Strengthening school community partnerships and improving well-being data systems. So relevant frameworks, there are many. We are a government of policies. How they're implemented is another thing altogether. So I'll not treat them. The role of schools and teachers: create safe and inclusive learning environments. Identify and support vulnerable learners. Strengthen mentorship and peer support. Integrate socio-emotional learning. Promote positive discipline as well as strengthen collaboration with parents and communities. Implementation challenges include funding, inadequate psychosocial support, shortage of trained counselors, mental health stigma, weak intersectoral coordination, limited evidence and monitoring systems. And in conclusion, I want to say there is need for evidence and research on the following areas. We need evidence and research on reliable school-level well-being data, research on effective interventions, monitoring resilience outcomes, evidence-informed policy implementation, as well as strengthening use of data for decision-making when it comes to learner well-being. And then strategic recommendations are stated there. Let me say this in conclusion. Student well-being is central to quality education. Resilient learners contribute to resilient education systems. Implementation requires collaboration and sustained investment. And finally, evidence-based interventions are critical for long-term impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we get our final presentation from Madam Beatrice, Zana Africa Programs. Good afternoon. Oh.
As they display, please take out your phone and show your neighbor an emoji of how you're feeling right now. Did they show you? Did they show you, Professor? Okay, my name is Beatrice. I work for Zana Africa. I'm going to come back to that emoji after 10 minutes, and I'll come back to that emoji after hours. So, next please. Zana Africa, we were tasked with the responsibility of scaling an initiative that is RCT proven called Near Learning Program. a program that was initially designed as an intervention to strengthen life skills, puberty, education, and foundational content for learners. And this was majorly delivered through community health promoters, community health workers, into schools after the learning, during the clubs, and any other time the teachers would coordinate that. After that, we connected with Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. That's a conversation I'll come back with after 2 hours. And we really needed to know whether this intervention would actually work in arid and semi-arid context. And so this work was done through a consortium member, Zana Africa Programs, Education Design Unlimited, whose CEO I see here. Jennifer, you can say hi. And then Dignitas, who did the teacher and school coaching sessions. And of course, our funders were IDRC and TPE. And so we went to Turkana and Garissa counties. And I want to apply a different model of presentation using storytelling, because we've listened to presentations quite a lot. So if you can play the video now. So as they play the video, how are the emojis? Do you have happy emojis? Do you have sad ones? Exhausted ones? Overwhelmed? Feeling irrelevant in the space?
In Kenya's arid and semi-arid
hear some
lands,
yes and no,
learning
not
is
sure.
shaped by more than
We're going to
lessons.
come back to it.
Families navigate
So allow
economic
me
pressure,
to say something,
climate
then
shocks,
stay on
and
it.
limited
Sit there.
access to services. As children grow into adolescence, many lack clear information about their changing bodies, their health, their rights, and their futures. Gender expectations shape daily life, alongside poverty, insecurity, and unequal opportunities. All of this enters the classroom with every learner, every day.
The norms and expectations of the society show up in children through their roles they play. Boys are assigned roles such as
Please restart.
looking after the animals, going for raid.
In Kenya's arid and semi-arid lands, learning is shaped by more than lessons. Families navigate economic pressure, climate shocks, and limited access to services. As children grow into adolescence, many lack clear information about their changing bodies, their health, their rights, and their futures. Gender expectations shape daily life, alongside poverty, insecurity, and unequal opportunities. All of this enters the classroom with every learner, every day.
The norms and expectations of the society show up in children through their roles they play. Boys are assigned roles such as looking after the animals, going for raids, and even some of them becoming border riders. And the girls have been also assigned roles of fetching firewood, and they're the ones doing household and domestic chores at home.
School should be where children build confidence, friendships, and a sense of safety. But in many ASAL communities, stress and worry can follow learners into class.
The girls have the mentality that they are supposed not to go to school. So the norms almost affected the girls. When the girls come to our schools, some are big girls because they were locked outside there in the rural areas so that they can wear beads, so that their parents get cows, because they value girls as a way of getting property in the society.
Children also carry important roles in family and community life, responsibilities that are part of the culture and daily life here. When resources are stretched, those responsibilities can become heavier, affecting time, focus, and participation in school. Some learners face insecurity at home or in the community. Some experience or witness gender-based violence.
Watoto sana sana ndio huwa na move long distances wakati wa kame kutafuta maji. Alafu kwa hiyo harakati kuna wale wakora. Pengine wanaweza kuta watoto wakitembea, pengine ni wasichana wanaanza kudefile watoto ama kurevya watoto njiani, sababu wamepatikana tu wana move wenyewe bila watu wazima.
Teachers care deeply about their learners, but many have never received training on social emotional well-being or gender-responsive teaching. Large classes, limited resources, and pressure to complete the curriculum leave little space to address these needs. This work started from one clear belief: learning and well-being can't be separated. The project, Adapting NIA Learning for Gender Equity in ASAL Schools, tested a proven Kenyan health education and life skills program in 2 ASAL counties by focusing on social emotional well-being and gender equity, helping teachers and education leaders create classrooms and school environments where every learner can participate and feel safe.
The NIA Guide is an RCT-proven program that supports adolescents with tools to help them navigate puberty and live their purpose. For this particular project, which is funded by the Global Partnerships of Education through IDRC, we are working in arid and semi-arid lands to gather data which will enable us to contextualize the NIA Guide to support socio-emotional well-being and gender equity and inclusion in the ASAL communities. So it was very key that we listen to the community, hear what they understand about health, education, life skills, socio-emotional well-being, and then support them to understand it better by using the information that they have given us.
Here's the policy question this project responds to. If teacher support is strengthened in ASAL schools, can classrooms become safer, more inclusive, and more engaging, even in resource-constrained settings? The training recognized the realities teachers work within and positioned them as frontline drivers of well-being and gender equity in school. Together, they explored how gender norms and daily stress can show up in learning.
The participants of the training came from 10 schools, 5 in Garissa County and 5 in Turkana County. The individuals from each of those schools included the teachers, heads of institutions, and we also invited members of the sub-county education department.
As a CSO, my role, I was able to provide that feedback that I get when I visit schools. I observe the lessons, then see what the teachers are doing. Also share with the heads of institutions so that they tell me some of the challenges as administrators they are facing, so that during the training now, we can address some of those challenges which are facing teachers.
They practiced small, realistic shifts they can keep building over time.
That training we learned how we can able to identify a disturbed learner in class who is absent-minded, is just but he is not concentrating in class. So you are advised that you are supposed to call that learner, then you sit with him or her, then you start exploring what might be the challenge. So the child will now open up and tell you one of 2, 3 challenges. So then you will now know on how to handle this learner and how we can cooperate with the class setup. Also another one, the method of delivery in class. For the learner to benefit, it's supposed to be learner-centered approach, whereby the learners now we are supposed to engage more, yes, whereby you can follow them in a group discussion instead of a teacher dominating in a lesson.
From the inclusion, I learned that the girls are lagging behind, maybe because they see a girl as a person to do chores at home. They forget that they are also part of the learning process. So through that training, we are able to support the girl child to be able to compete in such a way that they are able to answer the questions in the classroom. When you see them lagging behind, we prompt them that we want even the girl to participate, even in the leadership of the classroom. For example, we are electing the class prefect, we choose a boy and a girl, just to elevate the standard of a girl child who has lagged behind for so many years.
In the training, that's when you were told community practices in school. These things are supposed to be done, and that's what it is now practically in school. We normally do it in various terms. So we meet as a community practice and unit committee. Then we we identify these challenges that our learners are undergoing in our school, even as teachers. Then we bring those challenges. Then now we find what factors contribute to that challenge and what are some of the remedies they can put in place so that they can solve that issues.
After the training, teachers began describing a shift. They reported stronger awareness of learners' well-being and the role gender can play in participation and confidence. They formed communities of practice, identified learners who needed support, and collaborated to help them in times of crisis. With this knowledge, they began trying new ways of engaging learners, especially those who often sit back, stay quiet, or feel left out.
After the training, I now realized that some of these learners are even undergoing challenges at home, and some of these challenges are affecting them even in classes. So when I'm doing lesson planning or scheming, I'm now able to put them in mind. I'm now able to accommodate all of them.
We normally have guidance and counseling in school. Initially it was there, but it was not functional. That after the training now we made it functional.
We are taken through induction and we learn some few skills that we are able to handle the learners with the special cases and give them the appropriate guidance that they need.
The relationship between us and teachers have come more stronger than those days in the past. Some years ago, we are not allowed to enter the staff room, and even if we want to ask a teacher a question, we were not just allowed. But these days, our head teacher have said we allowed learners to go to staff room if they had a question for the teacher.
To reach this number that we have, enrollment of this school, the 6 teachers cannot do it alone. The number of teachers that have this information, it is minimal. This program, it has come back in to add the number of teachers and given a longer period for us to get more knowledge on it. So if it can be given 1 year, the information will sink to we as educators and it will trickle down to the learners.
When most of the teachers are equipped with this knowledge, this can make schools to be a safe space for these learners. These learners can now be able to even express themselves. They can now be able to come out and share with the teachers what they are undergoing. Because now these teachers are not just teachers, but are now even parents and even guardians.
When teachers are equipped to support well-being and gender equity, learning improves. But teachers can't do this alone. If we want inclusive, safe classrooms in all communities, classrooms where every child can participate and thrive, teacher support must be strengthened. Training, coaching, practical tools, and follow-up that lasts beyond a single workshop. Because inclusion is something they experience. When a teacher knows how to see them, support
Yes, thank you so much again for having us. But it is also nice to see the sort of convergence for the three presentations in terms of framing resilience. The issue of cybercrime, I think it has to be addressed. I talked about it, and also I think two presenters also talked about it. But also it's good to see that already the current ESP has prioritized cybercrime, because I think also Kenya is ahead of the rest of the countries in the region in terms of technology and advance in technology for education, right from Tusome and other programming. I think there's been a lot of emphasis on technology and building it into the education system. And we can't build it without addressing some of these issues if we are to use it well. Already when we are framing about the disruptions that affect an education system, issues of technology crop up, and this can be either a positive disruptor, like in terms of helping the learners or helping the teachers, but also it can be a negative disruptor, as we've seen for cybercrime and also other aspects. So I'm glad that these issues are coming up, and as a system we have to prepare to harness them, but also to meet them whether they are positive or negative. So how do we prepare a system that can leverage the positives but also address the negative aspects? Thank you so much, and back to you, Victoria.
Important. It's the issue of clear coordination. We need to think system-wide interventions. We need to start somewhere. It's one thing to lament, but I think there are some good things that are coming up. So we need to scale up what is working, and then not forgetting the most crucial things, like some of the things that you mentioned, trying to be very deliberate about dealing with things like physical, mental, emotional well-being, social and behavior things, so that at least we are more targeted in our interventions. Dear colleagues, in the interest of time, yes, actually, yes, I was about to call.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the issue of the school counseling, guidance and counseling programs, I want to say in the competency-based education, one of the things that have been introduced is what we call learner support programs. Under the learner support programs, we have guidance and counseling, we have career guidance and development, we have co-curricular activities, and we have chaplaincy. Now, those aspects must be actually implemented. And therefore, one of the things the Teacher Service Commission has considered as we are reviewing our new teacher registration framework is the question of introducing a teacher who has done a diploma in guidance and counseling or a degree in education in guidance and counseling. And we are now going to be enhancing the discussion on how to have those teachers absorbed in the teaching service. I hope you are getting the point. So we are looking, and then we are working with the Ministry of Labor on establishing functional career and guidance and career and guidance and counseling programs in our schools, so that we have professionals who can be able to handle the teacher, the learner issues, and even also the teacher issues, because the teachers also require counseling. So it is not only looked at the learner part, we are looking at the two of them. So we are introducing that, and we are in discussion with the Ministry of Labor to see if we can start having county career and guidance people, and then later we go down to the zone and to the school because of the question of the budget and the financing. But that is something that is being worked on. I think that is fine. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to appreciate our panelists. Let's give them 3 heart claps. 1, 2, 3. There are some people who are not clapping. And I told you, me, I'm a teacher. You will repeat the exercise. Again, 1, 2, 3. Yes. If I saw you are not clapping, you clap alone. But now, I forgive you. Otherwise, thank you so much, panelists. I want to hand over to Madam Anne to the next item in the program. Thank you. And you also clap for the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dhamburi and Victoria, for taking us through that session. The presenters, you've done a good job, and even varying the mode of presentation. That was good, Beatrice. We move into the next session, which is on data system and governance, unlocking the data initiative. This session will be moderated by Polycarp Otieno, so I welcome him. Karibu.
I don't know whether to pick up from where Dr. Dhamburi has left. So what do you imagine that I like to do? That if you don't do, I'm going to ask you to do? Hello? What do you imagine I like to do that if I asked you to do and you don't do, I'm going to ask you to do again? Huh? Dancing. That's not my forte, so you are safe. Anyway, I'm going to ask you as we move into the next presentation, into the session of data systems and governance. So I'm going to ask you as we invite our panelists, have you ever sat in a meeting? Have you ever sat in a meeting where one of your colleagues confidently raised their hands and said, "We need more data"? Raise your hand. We need more data. Raise your hand if you've sat in a meeting and you've heard your colleagues say confidently, "We need more data." Raise your hand. I can see. We need, am I speaking too fast? We need more data. Can you, please keep your hands up. Just keep them up. Don't get tired. And have you also sat in a meeting, the same meeting, where that data already existed, was already analyzed, and was just put in a shelf somewhere? Have you ever sat in that such a meeting? It was not analyzed. So, because you are all here, I'm going to invite our panelists today. We have a couple of them. We have my good friend Jaji from the IPED, AU IPED. He will tell us what AU IPED is. And he'll be talking to us about data used for education. AU MES norms and standards and analysis. Please raise to the podium. We're also going to have a colleague joining us from the Ministry of Education. That is Mr. Kennedy Tegeret, who is the head of,
to increase member states reporting in these processes. We thought we could help them build their capacities to strengthen national data management processes in general, which includes collection, usage, etc., etc. Also, the essence of member states or countries collecting data is not necessarily for the UN or for the AU. It is first for national usage. It is first for national consumption, that when a country collects their own data, it's not for any partner. First, it's to ensure that they are able to monitor their own education systems, to monitor the impact of their local level interventions, etc., etc. Before then, we start talking about partners like the SDGs and CESAR. So in the context of KICS, we have 18 of our KICS countries actively engaged in this process. The norms and standard document was developed during the second decade of education. And I don't know how many people were around during the second decade of education. Second decade. I feel old now. The second decade of education was before the SDG. We had the MDGs, which was the global goals at that time. the Millennium Development Goals. But on the continent, we had the second decade of education. Now, post-2015, we have the SDGs, and on the continent in Africa, we have what we call CESA, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. So these are the two frameworks that we expect countries to respond to SDG and as well as CESA. So this document has been reviewed from the MDGs time by our KICS countries to reflect, new and modern processes in education like AI and all of those things. These countries have reviewed them. So what are the EMIS norms and standards? I've mentioned that it has 15 norms. 15 norms around policy, around infrastructure, around human resources, around funding, around statistical processes, etc., etc. These 4 areas I've mentioned are what are responsible for an effective education planning in any country. When we speak about, kids are not going to school, we need more data, people forget that there is a planning side of education, and that's where all of the data is useful, all the statistics and everything. Now, if you get planning right, there is a very high chance that your learning outcomes and all of those things would be as desired. So the document focus on, it has 4 focus areas, it has 84 standards, and it has 4 quality levels as well. So the quality levels are the policy and legal framework around data, what guides data collection, institutions or even ministries mandated by policy to provide data. We talk about interministerial coordination on data management, where all of education statistics do not necessarily reside at the Ministry of Education. Some of them reside at the Ministry of Gender. Some of them at the Ministry of Planning. So is there some kind of a policy and legal framework that speaks to how data is exchanged amongst these different ministries? We have resource availability and utilization. Money, is an important aspect. But when we speak of resources in this context, it's not just money. There is so many things that are, intertwined into what we mean by resources. Statistical processes. How do you collect your data? What data, your data collection instruments, does it respond to your national intra-ministerial coordination around data? Your data collection instrument, is it just managed by the Directorate of Planning, and maybe the people at gender don't have a say in it, or people in inclusion and early childhood don't have a say in it? So these are some of the things that we find out. And then education information reporting. Now, people submit data in different places, and that's the only thing they do. They don't even hear back from the ministry. The ministry is hammering people, submit data. And then the schools are just sitting there, we just give data every year, we don't know what it means. So there's that feedback mechanism that must occur, that when a secondary school gives data to the ministry, it must come back to them in some kind of consumable form to say, okay, so this is what they mean by our infrastructure is doing well in this county, and and all of that. So these are the 4 pillars that guide the EMI norms and standards. I don't know how many minutes I have, but these are all of the norms on the screen. Mandates is tied to issues of legal. Some people can come to the ministry and send you a letter. Please, we are doing a research. We need this data, and all of that. Then can you give us, what does your policy say about data sharing, at the national level? Quality commitment is one. Confidentiality and cybersecurity. These are some of the new additions by our KICS countries in this document. They weren't there before, but when KICS came, the countries gathered together and they included that. Impartiality and objectivity. We have registration of institutions and learners. This one is a big deal in many institutions, many countries, sorry. You go to some countries, you ask for the master list of schools, and there are about 4 different lists, so you are confused, which list do we use, and all that. Adequate resources, I've spoken about money. Cost effectiveness, sound methodology, in how you calculate your statistics. Non-excessive burden on respondents. I will not mention the country, but I saw the data collection instrument, EMIS data collection instrument for one country, and it was like a Bible. And I'm like, how are they going to respond to all of this? And it was a big, very big book, So it's an issue. Relevance, like I said, every data collected must first be relevant to national context. We're not here to serve the UN. We are here to serve first the citizens, and whatever data we collect must be relevant to us, must be useful to us first, before then we start speaking about other. Accuracy and reliability is one as well. Timeliness and punctuality. Some countries collect data twice a year. Some countries collect just once a year. It depends on what occurs. Coherence and comparability. Comparability, when we speak about at the AU level, we want to be able to compare Kenya to Ghana. We want to be able to compare Nigeria to Togo, not comparing Nigeria to Mexico, where the contexts are completely different, which occurs mostly at the global level. So, and then comprehensiveness as well. Quality of statistics and fitness for use. These are the definitions of what we were talking about earlier on. Methodology that that the documents provides for is that there are 4 levels of quality check. There is poor, questionable, acceptable, and quality statistics. So based on the assessments that countries carry out, these are the levels of assessment of scoring. So how do we conduct this assessment? Of course, we have an application through KICS. Normally, the countries would apply. And then once they apply, and then we set up a peer team. 5 more minutes, okay. I think I skipped the part where we trained first the KICS countries on how to use this tool. And then when we train them, we issue them certificates in collaboration with UNESCO ICBA on how to be peer reviewers. So all of our KICS countries, they have an expert within their ministry that can confidently go to another country as a peer reviewer using this tool. So, and then training, self-assessment, countries conduct self-assessment, and at the end of this, at the end of my slides, I will show you the Kenyan context. Then the peer review happens, and then consensus. We produce the final report, including recommendations and action plan, costed action plan, on what the country must do to fix the gaps that have been identified. And then we are able to say, okay, this country produces quality statistics. So this is the 4 ways in which the countries have been utilizing, KICS countries have been utilizing the framework. They use it for self-assessment. They use the result of the self-assessment or the peer reviews for advocacy, or even for resource mobilization in some cases. They use it for regional review. It's not just one country. This thing also occurs at the REC level. East African community can have their own assessment, and then comparability happens at that level. When Kenya is compared to Tanzania, Tanzania is compared to Rwanda, first, regional level comparability is ensured, and then accreditation. So I think I had mentioned this a little bit. It's just the limitations before the review. Before KICS came, we had a document, and then after KICS or during KICS was when the countries came together and were like, before we can proceed with this, we need to review it. So these are the things that they added. They added issues of privacy and cybersecurity, learning assessment integration, crisis and humanitarian, SDG 4 and CESAR reporting. So my last 2 slides, this is the Kenyan context. Kenya did conduct the self-assessment, and I'm very happy to report, like I did yesterday in my speech, that Kenya has one of the highest scores, 313 out of 404 points, in terms of, I hope it's still the same anyway. And then overall rating of 77%. Total number of countries that participated in that exercise was 16. So this is where we were with Kenya. Policy and legal, Kenya is at 34%, which is quite low, but it's still a bit higher than the country average. And then we have resources, 75%, which means the government does actually put a lot of money around education planning. I did mention to, I think, Polycarp yesterday that when we came for a meeting at the ministry, we were taken downstairs at the Ministry of ICT, and there was a big server room. And that's the first time we were seeing that at the ministry, huge server room, and the government, I think they said they put $1 million to set all of that up. And I was like, okay, so this figure actually shows the truth. Statistical processing is 63%. It's good, it's above average, but of course there's room for improvement. And then reporting is 59%. So this can also be improved. So the strength that we've identified is that NEMIS, which I'm told now there is something else coming up after NEMIS, but this is what, when we did the assessment, NEMIS was what was in place. NEMIS was funded jointly by GPE and the national budget. There was a unique ID issued, technical working group on quality assurance publication, and then Data Protection Act safeguard personnel. And then the gaps that were identified, The policy at that time was still in draft. We don't know if it's been adopted now. Primary and private learners don't have birth certificates. And the unique ID Kenya was putting in place then was tied to the birth certificates of learners. So tertiary institutions hold student data in separate databases, different departments, faculties, data was all scattered around. Disability disaggregated enrollment data wasn't reported. So these are some of the things that we identified then. So thank you very much. I hope we've been able to tell you a bit about the norms and standards. For more information, this presentation will be shared. And then, of course, we're just an email away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaji, for keeping it within 15 minutes. And whatever questions you may have for Jaji, please pack them for the Q&A session. And his presentation is a very good segue to what Mr. Kennedy Tegeret has prepared to us. I know there is an ongoing development of KEMIS. So it's going to talk to us about data use for education planning and decision making, the current status and the priorities. Mr. Kennedy, are you with us? He's going to do our virtual presentation. So could you confirm that you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, please talk to us about NEMIS, KEMIS, data use, and education planning. And please keep it 15 minutes. We 5 minutes on top of the hour. So 16:20, we stop. Over to you.
Is it possible to project from the other side, my presentation? Yes, yes. Of basic education. I'm going to take you through data for planning in our State Department. First, I want to say data management in Kenya is guided by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, which is a semi-autonomous government agency under Ministry of under State Department for Planning. As we transition from the old system of 844 system of education to the new system under competency-based education, we need a lot of data. Data is needed as a driver to transformation and reforms agenda. So we need data for evidence-based decision making, also to allow for predictive forecasting, a mitigation of risks, and also to allow resource optimization. Are you getting me? Hello? At the same time, data is key because we need them in terms of when monitoring and evaluating some of our projects results. So availability of data ensures real-time tracking of outcomes through key performance indicators. So some of the categories of data that we normally involve demographic information, which involves enrollment rates, retention rates, and also transition rates. For infrastructure development also, we need some data on classrooms, laboratories, and also sanitation facilities. We also collect data on expenditure on education, which gives emphasis on how we are investing as a country in terms of labor productivity, to improve labor productivity. Also, we collect data on human resource, which deals with the issue of teachers. So in the next slide, we have the number of schools. These are the number of schools in our country. As you can see, the number of primary schools versus the private on pre-primary, then the number of public schools are almost, private schools are almost half of the public pre-primary schools. The same with the primary schools, we're almost having half of the number of private schools. For junior schools, we have slightly below half of the public schools. Senior schools, this is where we have a lot of discrepancy in terms of private versus public, where we have 15% of the senior schools are private schools. When it comes to primary enrollments, we have an increasing enrollment in terms of the primary schools. From in 2017, we had 10 million, and currently we have around 9 million. So the discrepancy is because of the reforms, where we have now the junior schools, which has taken a chunk of the primary students. But when you look at the basic education enrollment, it has been increasing from 16 million in 2017 to currently 17 million, almost 18 million. Basic education enrollment involves from ECD level to senior secondary schools. When it comes to gender parity, we are having the parity is almost fair when it comes to the ratio of boys to girls in primary schools. Total number of teachers, currently we have around 212,000 for primary teachers, making a ratio of 38.6 for public schools. So currently we have a ratio of 38. For completion rate, we have until 2022. That's when we closed standard 8. So we closed at 87.8. That's the completion rate. And primary secondary transition rate in 2022, it was 78.6. So that means we had some students who maybe went for tertiary institutions after primary education. Next slide, please. For junior school, we had junior school started in 2023, and currently we are fully fledged with all grade 10, 7, 8, 9 fully enrolled. So in 2023, we had enrollment of 1.2 million, and 2024 we had an enrollment of 2.5 million. Gender parity is in favor. Currently, is in favor. 2024 was in favor of boys. Number of teachers was 2024. It was 20,495, making a ratio of 123 students against one teacher. This is where we need a lot of efforts to bridge the gap. As you can see, junior schools marks the most significant reforms under the current education system. And the teacher-pupil ratio is very high, and it's against acceptable standards of 45 teachers, 45 students against one. So the GPE of 0.94, indicating a gender gap, and we need some monitoring to ensure transition from grade 6 to grade 7 doesn't favor boys. Under secondary education, we have a total enrollment currently of 4.3 from 2.8 in 2017. 4.3 is 2024 figures. Gender parity, it's fair, with the ratio of boys to girls almost equal. Teacher-pupil ratio is also fair, with currently around 33 pupils against one teacher. The increased enrollment at the secondary level is driven by the transition policy of 100%, the capitation support, and also infrastructure expansion. As we had said, the female participation has also improved, with the gender parity rising from 0.95 in 2017 to 1.01 in 2024. The number of secondary teachers increased to 130,000 to 818 in 2024. Under the education spending, we have an improvement from 2019-2020 financial year of 500 million. This is the total education budget, which from basic education to higher education. So from 500 million in 2019-2020 to 2023-24, 673 million. So this modest increase from under the current expenditure. We also have an increase from 479 million to 652 million. For development, it's 21 million from 2019-2020 to 20.6 billion. This in terms of billions in 2024-25. The total national budget share of education is 19 0.27 billion. And over the years, this figure has been decreasing. And currently in 2024-25 is 16.92. If you can see, you can see as we increase the spending on education, but the share to the national budget is reducing. Also the same with the spending, education spending as a share of GDP. In 2019-20, it was 4.8%, and currently is 4.1%. So that figure is decreasing. So this the decrease in the share of the GDP suggests that while the nominal increase Yes, Chair. Okay, Chair. Normally we collect our statistics from KNBS and also other data, other sources like control of budget. And currently we have a challenge in collection of data, and we hope chemists will help us collect quality real-time data. So we are hoping with the coming up of chemists, which is an improvement of the previous NEMIS, we shall have quality real-time data. We also hope that we shall have adequate financing to keep up with the reforms agenda, rising enrollment, and also to improve access. Because of the rising numbers in enrollment, we need adequate science laboratories, classrooms, dormitories, and also ablution blocks. This is especially in where enrollment growth has outpaced infrastructure expansion, which these gaps have directly impacted on attendance, learner dignity, and also learning outcomes. Chair, that will be the end of my presentation. I'm sorry for the hiccup, but my presentation is there, so I hope it will be circulated.
And the questions that you may have for Kennedy, I have a couple. So just keep them. You can just note them down. We are going to at least have 15 minutes that we can use for interrogating our three presenters. And
yeah, I'll save my friend Polycarp some time, so don't worry about it. We are the Unlocking Data Initiative, a research funded project, and our focus is scaling uses and users of data. So for us, it is to look at how can we increase the use of data. So the directors in the house, Haga, please bear with me when I talk about data passionately. So we are in 3 countries, Kenya, Malawi, and Cameroon. And we are 5 partners and ourselves. We are Mizizi, not Zizi anymore, so we are no longer using that logo. We work with the Ministry of Education. I can see colleagues here who we work with, both at the ministry and at the subnational level in the 3 countries. So in Cameroon, we are working with the clusters, 2 of them, the Central and Northwest. In Malawi, we are working with 2 districts, that is Machinga and Dedza. And in Kenya, we are piloting with 5 counties. Our new director is here, he wants us to move to Rift Valley. So that is the area that we are covering. But for me, to save Polycarp time, I look at what evidence have we found, and when you find me passionate about data, what did we find in this? Because it is research, then you find solutions about it. In the 3 countries, data is government. As you sit here, you should be proud. You have some of the best data that we can get. The best. Very nice data you have. So there's no question about that. The question is about, including what Usawa has, Claudia is not here. The issue is that data is not shared. So that was a finding that there's very little sharing, if any, that moves across the 2. And it is not only government, even ourselves in civil society, we don't even share with each other the data that we have, including international organizations. And there are several issues around that. One of them is trust. Haga will be Director Haga will be fearing that if I get his data, I'll fight him. A civil society will be fighting the government. So they are reluctant to give you that data. So the first question they ask, what do you want to use the data for? I saw Mujuba somewhere. He knows I always ask for this. The other one is policies. Sometimes the government has the data, but there are no policies to share that data because there has to be a platform on which that data is shared. The other one is capacity. Sometimes they also don't know how to share it, in what format, when can we share it. So sometimes the issue of capacity in which that data can be shared in its usable form can also be, was also found to be a challenge. A culture, an organizational culture that nothing prevents me from sharing the data with you, but the issue is, but we don't share. When you ask why, no, we don't share. But there is no reason, absolutely. And then closed repositories or repositories that cannot communicate. And that's, I think, what Munjumba is working on, and director. Very good work. The other finding was low evidence and data usage. Again, even when evidence is available, we found that in the 3 countries, sometimes there is no capacity to recognize this is good evidence and this is how we can use it. So you have the evidence, but then what do you do with it? This is a story of being in a position but not able to do what it pertains to do with that position. So ideally, that was also a finding. And there are issues. Policy sometimes, the data policy is also curtailing government in sharing and using this. The other one is narrow focus. Our focus is foundational learning, so I should have said that. Ages 4 to 10. So you find that the evidence available in that space is limited to literacy. There's so much evidence on literacy compared to the other foundational learning skills like numeracy and socio-emotional skills. So there's a skewedness towards literacy. And that is a question, again, we can answer within these spaces. Non-disaggregated data, even when that evidence is available, this is not something that can be rebound. That data is not disaggregated into regions. And here I'm talking about across the 3 countries, not about Kenya. Not disaggregated in terms of gender. We know foundational skills are not gender neutral, and therefore they need to be disaggregated. The other issue is by geographical issues and even marginalization issues. Migrants, refugees, learners with disabilities, learners out of school. We do not have that foundational data disaggregated that way. Lack of resources, skills sometimes. Data analysis skills can be a challenge in these countries. Softwares, they are expensive. So, I mean, they do not sometimes have a budget line for that. So that's an issue. And also repositories. Foundational learning is missing in these countries. And I remember in CIS last year in Chicago, we were asked, why do we push for a policy on foundational learning? But we know the government budgets and only plans for things that are in the policy, not outside the policy. So they only plan and budget for ECD, primary and secondary. But foundational learning now lies in between somewhere there, and therefore it misses the issue. The other one is the evidence generated within the foundational learning and a gender dimension. In Kenya, evidence is dominated by female researchers as main authors, while in Malawi and Cameroon, it is male dominated. So again, Director, Commission for University Education, that's an issue that we can question here. So, and there were many other issues. Like for instance, in Cameroon, the country is Francophone, but the journals, the evidence generated is in English. So you find that the Francophone areas do not get that. So that's evidence we found. And what have we achieved so far, or what have we done so far? Some of the things we have achieved, we cannot claim a lot of things in 2 years. So we are in the formative stages and we can only observe a few outcome cases. Patrick is here, can confirm that. Some of them are formalization of engagements. These conversations we always have with Director Mujumba, Director Haga, those conversations, now we have a letter of engagement from the CS Basic Education. We got it last week, saying that we can continue having conversations and collaborations. We have a letter now from NEC, again, within this month, talking about the same thing, collaboration, continue letters of commitment. Producing evidence gap maps, showing those gaps, where are they? So that when you are acting, you know, what are we acting on? What evidence is missing in terms of interventions, in terms of outcomes? And then demonstrating what existing data can do. So I'm not one of those people who ask for more data. I normally ask for, can we get the data to reuse it, repurpose it? So that we can show the world what can this data do, because that is the purpose why Unlocking Data Initiative was born in 2020, when we could not move, and the question was, what can we do with the data we have? Then subnationals using data beyond routine questions. in the three countries, and particularly in Kenya, I can talk about Kenya. We are, after engagement quite in the 2 years, we are seeing situations where these counties are now collecting more data to use for more work than they were using. Like not the routine data they are asked for, but they are going for more data, like water tracking in Marsabit. We have the data collected in Kisumu for land titling, collecting data for ECD centers to see which ones have title deeds, which ones don't have. That is not some of the routine data. So seeing these counties moving beyond the normal data is quite something we are proud of. And then what are the reasons? I think peer-to-peer, some of these, only that the program was so packed. We should be learning from one another so that government and ministries and directorates can be learning from one another. How can we share? How can we do this? And then formal agreements that start with the uncomfortable conversations, informal conversations between me and the director here, my colleagues from the ministry. Talking openly, voluntarily, and with low pressure. Those conversations are the ones that lead to more engagements and formal engagements. That's what I wanted to say. That's why I told you I'll save you time. Then, what are the decisions what policies have we been able to influence? I would not mention some of the teams we have worked with because of non-disclosure agreements, but we have been able to utilize data here with some of the directorates here and produce some outputs, but we are not allowed to talk about that. Funding, we just got an MOU with the Commission, with the NRF, National Research Fund, to fund education research under HERI, which is universities taking over the research function. And for the research I heard Dr. Thamburi talk about, universities taking that space and saying we want to know where the gaps are so that we can fill them. And then government opening up. That one I have to laud them. Slowly by slowly, we are seeing government saying, come, let's co-analyze this data. Let's develop something. That one I can confirm that I have colleagues here who are saying, just come, let's see what we can do with this data. Then I think these others are normal things. I can only say, what is the message for uptick? I think we need to focus. Government only works mostly on what has a legal basis. So if we want to move data, we must look for outputs that are legally required. So we look for those gaps in the policies where a report is required annually or quarterly. That is the easiest thing to attack. So that's what I would share with you, that you are easier to tell them, you are supposed to produce this, and they tell you, yes, we know. And you have the data. Yes, I know that. So then, is it capacity that you don't have? Is it, we can do that, help you do that with technical capacity, and you produce the report. And then that really works very well. I think that's what I can say. Thank you so much.
Another round of applause for the three presenters. And now, having listened to what Kennedy had to say about the current status of data in the ministry, shared with us some evolutions. We've also heard from Jaji about the AU norms and standards, and finally from Yashoki on some insights from the work they're doing. Any question to them? We have, yes, some bit of time, 20 minutes. So I'm going to have I'm going to have Olga, and then there is Veronica. I have Rage, number 3. Only 3 questions. We have 20 minutes, so there is a bit of time. Ifa, number 3. Okay, and then there is Professor Mayo. So we can start with that, Olga, you can start. Please keep it brief.
So thank you very much for this presentation. I'm always fascinated by the data. So I have a question to Director Tegeret, and it's a bit related to what Dr. Charles mentioned. For Dr. Tegeret, I'm Olga Ambotinyongo. I'm the Gender and Inclusion Specialist for the Global Partnership for Education. So my question is about your presentation. So for me, as I work regionally, and generally I look data related to boys and girls and gender parity index, etc. And one of the first things that I do is that I look at statistical annual education statistic booklet in every country where I'm covering. So the data that you presented actually are the data that in other countries we find every year in the annual education statistic booklet. So I'm in Kenya since 1 year, and I work also on Kenya, and for me, it was a challenge to find this booklet, and generally we can look at those information for the different years and and it's a baseline for as comparison. So, is there a plan to have, and that is related to a little bit what Dr. Charles said, to have this information accessible? Because there is, as Dr. Charles mentioned, there is sometimes gap in access to data, and that's one of the main data or information that we look at when we work on education. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Veronica.
Thank you, Polycarp. Also, my question is to Mr. Kennedy on the data he managed to share. So, as we talk about the completion rates and also the transition, I noted that in 2020, the year that education was hard hit by COVID, where we had a lot of children who are out of school, who faced a lot of protection issues that led to a lot of dropout. It's the year where we had the highest rate of completion at 94.6 and transition at 91%. As compared to all the other years. So checking what are these factors that would have led that hard year for the education sector to be the year that really outperformed on these two indicators. Thank you.
Kennedy notes that. And Rage?
Thank you. My name is Mahmoud Rage from Somalia Ministry of Education. I would like to ask some questions to my colleague, planning head, relating to NIMIS and KEMIS. I want to ask, how is data captured in the system? Is it a census or is it school level data that is entered by the head teacher? According to the report we have seen, the reporting year is only 2024. I don't see 2025. And the other thing about the education expenditure, do you only capture the spending by the government or the private sector spend is also captured in the system? Thank you.
Thank you. Very straightforward. There was Ifa. Kindly pass the mic to Ifa.
Thank you so much, all the presenters. I had a question for, is it Jaji or Chachi? Or it depends on where I grew up. Could you help me?
He's called Lukman Jaji.
Lukman Jaji. Okay. So with all due respect, I'm Kenyan and I address you with all due respect. I just wanted to find out if there has been a way in which countries can be guided on how to collect data that serves national reporting, AU reporting for CESA, and SDG4 reporting, because doing learning assessments is very expensive. Is there a way in which we can consolidate either criteria, credibility criteria that replicates what can do national reporting, CESA reporting, and SDG4 reporting? That's what I would like. And then maybe a little bit of a comment on the norm that you talked about of relevance. Most of us in this room start doing learning assessments without the purpose in mind. So we collect data, we have donor funding, we have written something, and then midway we want to change course and say, now we want to do SDG4 reporting. While the criteria that you have used all along does not correspond to what data that is acceptable for SDG4 reporting. And then now the push comes, political, the donor goes to the political side of the education wing and pushes things to be acceptable. But technically it's not acceptable. What do we do with such? How do we talk to each other in this room on what is technical rigor around SDG4 reporting, CESA reporting, and national reporting to have better policies in place?
Wow. Yes, and finally, Professor Mayo. And as he asked the question, Mr. Tegeret, please, you have some 3 questions ready. Kindly it's on them so that we are in time.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My question goes to Kennedy Tergert. We note with a lot of concern that from the presentation, there is decrease in terms of teachers in primary schools. I don't know why, but maybe it will be explained. But my greatest concern is about that the data you have given, it means that you have a very good data. But at times every year we hear that the ministry was able to allocate expenditure to schools which does not exist. So I wonder, how do that happen? And yet you have good data that shows there is this school exists in this region, there is these students, there is everything. How does that come? Then my last question is about, this will be quite open to all of us. We come from university. We submit data to Commission for University Education. We submit data to COOPS. We submit data to the ministry. At times also we submit the same data to HELP. So is there a way that, because the same data is being asked, so at times it makes it very difficult for the universities to give those data, and therefore it goes to inaccuracy because somebody will want to clear the table and give the data to whoever that he wants. Is there a way that our ministry can coordinate so that we can get some of this data at one point, which will ensure that it's an accurate data? Thank you.
Yes, lots of questions to you. Kennedy, please, if you have a response, kindly take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start with what Prof. Said asked on decreasing number of teachers in primary schools. After the rollout of the new CBE, all the efforts were channeled towards junior school education. So you'll find that a lot of teachers have been, the recruitment of teachers were basically for junior schools and also senior schools. So this left, so a lot of teachers in primary schools, due to attrition rates, I think there is a general decrease because of that. So there have been no increase, and at the same time, no enrollment, no new teachers being employed. For allocation to non-existing schools, I don't want to belabor on that. It borders on a lot on politics. For Veronica, completion rates during and transition rates during COVID, I hope Mujumba is there so that he can help me reply on that. That's for Veronica's question. Dr. Olga talked about regional data, and she said she has been interested in the issue of boys and girls statistics. And yeah, for us, the statistical booklet, I think the last one we had was in 2023. So from there was a census report. Census was done in 2024. And we are still waiting for the release of the report. So after that census, we have not done any statistical booklet. So all our data are accessible. If you need more of our data, currently we have the economic survey, which is being released every year. It contains most of our data also. So you can access them from that point. For Amud, the issue of NEMIS and CHEMIS, the data collected through that system is school level. These are school level data and not census. So all the school heads are required to input their data at their level. So for expenditure under public sector, that's where that's my domain. And we have not been able to really. I think, Chair, those are my remarks, and I wish to give this chance to Mujumba to say something.
Please do. Okay. So I think the point you raised around this whole three levels of reporting: national level reporting, CESA reporting, and SDG4 reporting. And I think I did mention that for us, I think the most important is the national level reporting, because you want to be able to respond to the needs of your citizens. And in 2018, I think your Cabinet Secretary for Education was Amina, I think, Dr. Amina. She hosted the Pan-African Conference on Education here. And one of the outcomes of that conference was that the member states said that they recognize this burden on countries to respond to CESA, to respond to SDG, to also respond to their own national level priorities and all that. So we were given a mandate, AU, IPED, and UNESCO Institute for Statistics, to work together to streamline the reporting processes for SDG4 and CESA. So right now, we are almost at the final stage of collecting data once by one process. SDG4 and CESA will be collected only by one process, so that you don't get Excel from Montreal asking you to submit this data or that data. And then we also don't send it. We just send one platform and everybody submits data there. It responds to the two frameworks. The second question around what is relevant. What is relevant should be informed by the provisions of your sector plan, because that's what defines what the country needs. If you try to define relevance by the needs of your partner, you've seen how we've moved in the last 20, 30 years from Jomtain to Education for All to MDGs and now SDGs. And with each of those processes having different reporting requirements. And it means a country is not expected to plan, their national priorities around that, but what is defined in their sector plans. And for example, GPE, and we have GPE colleagues there, also moved through different reporting requirements, starting from enabling factor analysis to sector plans, and now to the compact process, and all of those things have, different kinds of reporting requirements. But what is important, however, is that we want our countries to build the demands or the requests of partners around their own national priorities and not the other way around. How that would happen would depend mostly on what occurs at the national process. African countries are not homogeneous. Everyone has different national processes and all that. The last point you gave on relevance is tied to the first 2 points that I've given around what is relevant should be defined by what the country has identified as priorities and what is highlighted in national sector plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge, for that comprehensive report. And of course, as Mr. Mujumba comes up, as the mic goes to Mr. Mujumba, to talk about the transition from NEMIS to KEMIS and how you're going to be dealing with data collection. One thing that should be clear is that the conversation around post-2030 education and how and what is going to be measured has already begun. And so it will be important that we even start that conversation around how do we align reporting. We start it now so that countries do not get caught up much later once everything is defined. Over to Mr. Mujumba. 2-3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know whether I should stand. Maybe I should.
And please, since you joined us after introduction, you could have 3.5, the half you can do for your introduction.
Okay. My name is Mjumba Uboere. I work for the Ministry of Education. I'm in charge of the Kenya Education Management Information System. I always get these questions that what is the difference between Kenya Education Management Information System and National Education Management Information System. One is the national database that covers learners from ECD all the way up to university. That is KEMIS. The other one is for basic education, covers learners from ECD up to senior school, secondary school. But one has had issues because of currently where we are in terms of education. It lacks a number of system challenges were noticed. And so that was the reason of transition from NEMIS to KEMIS. NEMIS still exists, but it's rarely used. KEMIS is coming into play. It went live last week. And schools are now inputting basic data. What is the learners, the learners and their details are now being input into the system. So that is the major difference between them. One is at a standard higher, and therefore it's supposed to create an element of integration to be able to pull up all the data that is required, all the evidence that is required to improve learning outcomes in education. And that is why it is running through the entire education sector. Sometimes I also get questions that, are we going to do away with the systems that you already have? Not necessarily. If the system is able to integrate with the KEMIS core, we build a KEMIS core, then we integrate all these other systems and look at their standards in terms of data so that when that happens, then the systems that are already there exist. So we call KEMIS a systems of systems. I think I've explained that one. There was a question that Tegat was trying to explain there is a question about teachers reducing. It is just general knowledge that in primary schools, we had 8 classes, class 1 up to class 8. But when we transition to the new competency-based education system, the classes in primary school reduced from 8 to 6. So generally, you will expect that the number of teachers will reduce because the classes have also reduced because a number of these teachers were being transitioned into junior school to assist in providing instruction at that level. So that was the expectation. And we see there will be no any other real reason for the teachers reducing. It is just because of the transition from 844 to the now 26333 system. During COVID, indeed, we had a bit of issues in regard to transition, but the ministry then put in place what we are calling a disaster recovery strategy. And we noticed that there was 2 things that did take place. There was acceleration of the learning programs within the schools, and because of the policies that were put in place, there were dropouts, there were students who didn't continue, but the transitions were not really affected. If I take, for example, from secondary schools to higher education or tertiary education, the transition still remained what we are used to, 10% getting to university education, around there, and another above 15% getting into TVET institution. So that did remain even during the COVID time. I think that is what I can mention for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in any case, you're going to have much more time during your session. If you could add anything, please do. Because of time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end it there. First of all, I have to apologize for having taken 10 more minutes of the time that was allowed to us. A round of applause for the 3 gentlemen that have made the presentation. And I didn't hear those claps were sounding like those people who are inspired to go and use data. Can I get a better round of applause? Yeah, thank you so much, Kennedy. We're looking forward to continued engagement with you. And thanks.
Thank you so much, Polycarp. Let's also appreciate him for making sure that we are attentive to data issues and committing that we will be able to utilize data so that it stops lying in our shelves. So thank you so much. I will really ask that we will stretch a little bit, but before I call upon the next moderator, I will ask Dr. Marigat.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's be upstanding. I think we've been sitting since morning. We want to do some little data in the process. I hope you can see me all. Us to do some little exercise. We will do the exercise using our bodies and also our mouths. And very simple calculations are 5 factorial. We will start with the right. We count 5. Okay, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're not counting. Yes, count loud. Yes. We also need to exercise our mouths, right? So please make sure you have some space, director, because we will do 5. We will do 5. Then we will do right leg 5. When we will do left leg 5. And we'll come all the way to 1. And as we go towards 1, the volume of our voices need to be high, all right? Are we ready? At the back, are we ready? Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are people who are not counting. Yes. My height mate. Yes. Please, yeah, behind you. Please, let's count. Lillian. Lillian, you'll be the prefect on the other side. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Left leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Swag. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Faster. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 1.
Thank you for greeting us. So we move into a session that will be moderated by Veronica Wangui from UNICEF. Veronica, oh, you're there. From evidence to scale and policy. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. That sounds very tiring. So good evening, everyone. So thank you so much. So welcome to our next panel. We've been talking about evidence the whole time. We've talked about data. So now on this panel, we are going to look at how we're going to go from evidence to scaling and also to policy. So across this education sector, we have piloted a lot of innovations that have given us creative ideas and creative evidence that can be used to scale education. We've had, how do we change the systems? How do we move this evidence to scale and then to policy? So we're going to have a panel discussion, which we will start with one presentation from Ms. Molly Curtis, who will be doing the presentation online, and she will help us to understand what can governments do? How can we scale? How can we use these evidence? So Dr. Ms. Molly, you have 10 minutes for you to share this with us. And then after the presentation, we will now move to the panel session where we have our participants in here. So over to you, Ms. Molly.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen and see if you're all able to good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I know you've had a full and busy day, so I will be prompt as I share these research and findings with all of you. So my name is Molly Curtis. I'm an assistant project director at the Brookings Institution, which is a public policy think tank in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to share some of the research we've done on decision-making about scaling at central and middle levels of education governance. So this is sharing findings from a research project we call ROSI, which is research on scaling the impact of innovations in education, which is part of GBE KICS. Of course, you've all been speaking about that today and yesterday. So just really briefly, ROSI has a couple of key activities, but one of them is this ongoing research on government decision-making about scaling in education, and that's really what I'll be sharing with you all today. So I wanted to first frame the conversation by highlighting how we at Brookings think about scaling, which I think is also indicative of how the broader GBE KICS ecosystem thinks about scaling, because we know that it can mean different things to different people. So it's helpful to define it so we're all on the same page what we're talking about. So for us at ROSI, we think about scaling not as reach or sort of endless growth, right? How many schools, how many students reached, but really a focus on expanding and deepening the impact of an innovation so that it has a lasting improvement on people's lives. So not interested in scaling to more schools or scaling across new regions if the impact doesn't come with it. And scaling can take multiple approaches, but often in education, we know it means integration into national systems so that the innovation really becomes part of the way that the system operates. So the reason that we're focused on scaling impact in particular in our research is that we've seen that there are so many promising or proven education innovations that really succeed at a small scale, but never make it to large-scale sustainable change. And so we know a lot about what works for a few children, and we really struggle to extend those benefits and to sustain those benefits for large numbers of children. So we know that understanding what is holding scaling back, what the constraints are, and also what can accelerate it is key to education improvement. And we've also seen that the reason few innovations successfully scale is largely not because the innovation is ineffective or poorly designed. It's really because there's a lack of fit between the innovation, the scaling strategy, and the broader environment. So most scaling failures, they're not about the innovation. It can be an evidence-based innovation that has shown a lot of impact, but they're about everything around the innovation that constrained the scaling. So our research is looking at one element of this broader environment that shapes scaling, which is how government actors make decisions about what to scale, which innovations to scale, and how we can use that information as we're thinking about developing innovations and making scaling decisions. So I'm just going to very briefly share that this has been research over the past 6 years, conducted in 2 phases. The first phase focusing really on central level decision making, and the second phase on mid-level decision making. I won't spend a lot of time on the methods, but I did want to share, for the central level decision making, we looked at 8 countries, and we did 2 rounds of research with 20 interviews and 7 research reviews. The second round of research on mid-level decision-making was conducted in 4 of those original 8 countries. And we collected data in a capital city and a rural location in each country for a total of 90 interviews, as well as multiple research reviews in collaboration with local researchers in each location. So let me dive into some of the findings. The first is that when it comes to decision-making about what innovations to adopt and scale at the central level, we saw that decisions were rarely about the innovation itself or even the scaling strategy. Really, they were about whether the innovation fits the broader policy environment that the decision makers are operating in. So we might feel that decision-making looks linear and technical, but really we saw that it's about navigating the competing pressures of the broader environment with limited time and limited information. And this is important, of course, as we're thinking about sharing evidence about innovations that work, because if it's not just about the innovation, but it's really about how it fits with multiple dimensions of the environment, that's very different. So I'll share a bit more about the broader environment and how it informs decision-making. We categorize the key factors we saw into 5 dimensions. So the first dimension of the broader environment that we saw influencing decisions about what innovations to adopt and scale was national politics. Probably not surprising, right? Political pressure, electoral cycles, ministerial turnover, those all influence what innovations are selected for scaling. If a government changes and new leaders come in, the scaling work that was happening often pauses or restarts, and relationships have to be rebuilt from scratch. We saw that new leaders may want to discard an old innovation that was in the process of scaling and embrace something new to demonstrate change or progress. And so these factors really drive adoption decisions more than the evidence. It could be that there's a great evidence-based innovation, but if it doesn't necessarily make sense with the political incentives, it won't be selected. And one potential casualty of this is sustainability. If there's so much focus on determining an innovation that we can have consensus around choosing, there might be less focus on whether that innovation can stand the test of time. The second factor we saw influencing decisions about which innovations to adopt and scale are donor priorities. And again, maybe unsurprisingly, we saw donors really fundamentally shape what innovations get considered for. This can really create a tension for decision makers between speed, choosing something that they can quickly adopt and demonstrate, and sustainability, which requires time and patience and reform continuity. Certainly, this is not true of all donors, but we did see that often decisions were shaped by donors' current priorities and preferred innovations. And this was closely linked to the third factor we saw, education transfer. And we saw that there's really a short list of smart buys, as they're called, that dominate the global conversation on which innovations to invest in, and really a tendency for donors to recommend just a handful of preferred innovations to many different countries, regardless of the context, so that the scope of recommended options often becomes focused just on the same small basket of innovations across countries, in spite of the very real differences between them. As a result of this, we saw that education transfer, which is moving innovations from one country to another, has really become the default when choosing which innovations to adopt and scale. And that's certainly not automatically bad. A lot of times those innovations have been demonstrated success elsewhere. They have rigorous evidence behind them, which is of course important. But to do it well requires that the innovation then be contextualized to the new location. And we heard that, small adaptations and contextualizations, translating into the local language, changing photos, things like that, those are happening. But the deeper contextualization that can make sort of the cultural or systemic adaptations usually doesn't happen because it's time consuming and expensive. And that can really limit the impact of what's being adopted. So we saw that decision makers often face a trade-off of having to select an innovation that can quickly be contextualized because it's cheaper to scale and moves more quickly, even if it's less likely to produce a sustained impact, because they're under a lot of time pressure, and that makes it difficult to do otherwise. We also saw that this focus on innovations from external sources can mean that homegrown innovations don't get as much attention. And while they aren't necessarily better, we do know that homegrown innovations, they emerge from local needs, they have grassroots support, but the fact that they aren't in this global menu of options can mean they aren't even on the table when being considered. The fourth factor we saw shaping what innovations are being adopted and scaled is just the dominance of education technology. I'm sure lots of you have experienced this recently with the hype of AI, that decision makers, like their constituents, often want to invest in edtech innovations because they're exciting, they're new, they signal modernity, but also tech companies are marketing them strongly, donors are prioritizing them. However, we know that the evidence of edtech on impact on learning outcomes, there's not very much. And what evidence does exist is often not from the local context, or it's out of date, or it's difficult to access, or it's produced by the very companies who are selling the product, and so not impartial. And so we saw that there was a lot of demand for selecting, adopting, scaling edtech innovations, but it really wasn't based on evidence. It was based more on ideas of what edtech represents, the promises edtech holds, and also the external influences encouraging edtech adoption. So the final factor, I think you can see the absence so far is we haven't talked a lot about evidence of impact as being a primary factor. Certainly, evidence is important, but there was an absence of meaningful data that constrained some decision makings that we heard about from our interviews. We heard lots of calls from global actors for collecting more data. But we know that the issue is a lot more complicated. There are logistical reasons, resource and capacity constraints for limited data collection. And even where data exists, decision makers maybe don't have the time or training to use them to inform decisions. And there may be political reasons for intentionally not collecting or disseminating certain data. So these 5 dimensions, of course, don't operate in isolation. They really tangle together. And we've seen that decision makers have to navigate all of them at once when trying to determine what to adopt and scale. So sort of stepping back, the takeaway from this part of the study was that decision makers are really balancing competing demands at the same time when they're considering which innovation to adopt and scale. The first is feasibility. Can we actually implement and scale this innovation given our resources, capacity, and time? But also the motivation. Is there the political and constituent will and support to adopt and scale this innovation? And sustainability. Will it last past the next election or funding cycle? And as you can see from this continuum, from this diagram, these are really continuum. Decision makers probably won't get a high score on all 3 of these. And so they're constantly navigating these unavoidable trade-offs and walking a metaphorical tightrope, trying to balance these different pressures and forces. And I think the key takeaway here for those of us who are interested in seeing good innovation scale is to understand very much that demonstrating the evidence of impact of an innovation and why it will improve learning outcomes or improve efficiencies isn't enough. It's really critical to understand the landscape and these various factors and pressures and account for them in scaling plans and strategies. Let me quickly move to the second part of our study, and then I will turn it all back over to you. We then turn to look at the middle level of education systems, the level between the central government and the schools, so regions, districts, sub-districts, and municipalities, because they have some really important assets that could be leveraged to improve education systems' ability to scale innovations. They have a really unique positioning between these 2 levels that could help them be a critical bridge between the central level and the schools, translating policy downward, communicating local needs upward. They have significant accumulated education experience and local knowledge, which means they could identify, contextualize, and scale innovations, doing that really important contextualization work we were just talking about, and provide instructional leadership. Of course, they're invested in their local education success, which could help ensure sustained engagement beyond the short-term project cycles I mentioned. And they have close ties to schools and communities, which could be used to improve the likelihood of local ownership for sustained improvement. One of our consultants we were working with said it well. In reality, no education innovation can reach the classroom without the middle tier. However, we saw from our research that in practice, this potential for the middle tier to contribute to scaling education reforms is largely untapped. I won't go into too much detail about why, but we really saw that across the 4 countries we studied, mid-level offices and actors are really not involved in identifying innovations, contextualizing them, or leading the scaling. They spend most of their time on data collection, compliance, administration, reporting, and implementing externally initiated innovations. They really have limited time to spend on teacher development or instructional support, even though those are areas that the global community right now is advocating the middle tier to do more. And they have very little decision-making scope about adapting, adopting, and scaling innovations. And our sort of big takeaway here is that finding ways to restructure and strengthen and make improved use of these assets of the middle tier could be really important for countries who are willing to transform these systems a little bit to better support scaling. That would mean rethinking what the roles focus on, less focus on compliance, more on innovation, adaptation, and pedagogical leadership. That would mean offering tailored training and professional development, since many of these actors don't have specific training in their roles, and bringing their voices into central level deliberations as well as into engagements with NGOs and donors. So I'm sure I'm at my time limit, so let me just put it all together with a final few thoughts. As we're thinking about evidence-informed scaling and how to choose innovations to adopt and scale, and then how to proceed with the scaling process, again, in ways that are informed by data, our first takeaway is that we really have to understand and acknowledge the complex balancing act that decision makers are navigating, the pressures and incentive structures that inform the decisions they are making, because this is a really important part of the process, not just pitching the impact of an innovation. We also have to recognize how things like electoral politics and donor pressure or enthusiasm for EdTech can inform decision-making in unintentional or perhaps not preferable ways. And those are real constraints, and so we have to work to recognize and mitigate them where we can. We also think it's important to think about the culture of data use and not just getting more data or getting more accessible data, but thinking about ways that people need a reason to use data, to interpret it, and have the autonomy to act on it, so that it's not just another chore to report upwards. And then finally, we think that there would be a lot of benefits in fostering a stronger middle tier that could be more involved in scaling innovation. So let me stop there. I hope I didn't speak too fast for all of you. And I will turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you so much.
As she mentioned, my name is Jemima. I work with Innovations for Poverty Action, or IPA if you like. So before I respond to her question, it's good to give a bit of context so you'll understand what my response will be connecting to. So IPA is an organization that has been working at the intersection of policy and research for the last 23 years. And our work focuses on generating rigorous evidence and supporting decision makers to utilize that evidence. So one of the ways that we make that happen is through a mechanism that we call embedded evidence labs. So this is actually a unit where IPA works hand in hand with government to support internal capacity development as a way of providing long-term sustainable mechanisms for government to be able to translate evidence to policy and practice. And so with that background, I want to share just a little bit about the Education Evidence Hub, which is a partnership between the Ministry of Education, IPA, and partners. And this was conceptualized back in 2021. So this came from a point of conversations with partners where government, or rather the ministry, highlighted several challenges across data and evidence use. And so one of the challenges was inadequate processes to translate evidence to policy impact. So when you talk about processes, this is internally at the ministry. Let's look at it from the point where the ministry also generates its own data. The ministry is not only relying on other partners to bring in the data, but now, for example, the data that sits within the Ministry of Education, how can they put in place processes for them to be able to learn from their own data, but also build internal skills to be able to analyze and interpret the findings into the decision-making processes. So that is an internal capacity that was lacking. And at the same time, when you talk about the skills and the knowledge to utilize, the ministry needs to be enabled to understand how to analyze, but also what is the interpretation of these different data and evidence that we're coming across. There's also the aspect of data systems. Are the data systems sufficient to produce quality data, timely data, and in comprehensible formats? So in essence, the Education Evidence Hub is looking to build that internal capacity where the ministry is taking the leadership and owning the process of identifying what the gap is, working through methodologies of generating relevant evidence and data insights, and finally leading the process to applying those insights into the decision-making points. And so that is the main role that government needs to play for these kind of processes to be embedded. That's the whole point of embedding this internal capacity and processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will turn over to our second panelist, that is Mrs. Beatrice. We already saw what she's doing for girls and in arid and semi-arid areas. So it's the same initiative that we're still going to proceed with, if I'm not wrong. So from your perspective of working in this field, what does it take to move these projects towards national or kind of a regional adoption?
Thank you very much. Allow me to provide a background. The randomized control trial that was done in Kilifi in 2018 was supposed to highlight whether Zan Africa is a manufacturer of pads. We give pads for dignity for free to girls, as well as panties to girls and boxers for boys for dignity. So we were running an RCT to define whether pads alone could keep girls in school, or pads combined with health education and life skills could keep girls and boys in schools, or whether either of them could actually give us better outcomes. While the RCT demonstrated that both pads and health education and life skills could not keep girls in school, it also provided evidence that there were positive outcomes. The girls felt more dignified, they felt more able to engage in conversations, they were confident, they felt they had better health education to be able to navigate puberty and hold conversations that were intergenerational, both in school and at home. So the RCT moved into a conversation with the Ministry of Education through the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. And it fell straight into pertinent and contemporary issues. And one of the ways to make sure that scaling is possible is initiating the conversations with the policymakers who know the gaps that are existing, with the government who knows the priorities that they are seeking to gain evidence. We heard from Mother Mother and the other government team saying, we are inviting you to help us research in specific areas. So for KICD at that time, so we moved ahead to conduct primary research across the former 8 regions of Kenya. And last year, but one in 2024, we completed the report. And so when we got this funding opportunity, we went back to KICD and had a conversation about what can we do more to measure adaptation. And they specifically highlighted that the ASAL communities, we needed to find out whether this model that worked in Kilifi, worked in Nairobi, would actually work in ASAL communities. So this evidence that we have gained from Turkana and Garissa is actually a small portion of a bigger conversation that is happening with Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Now, from this evidence and from the primary research, we have moved to convene through KICD a committee from the Ministry of Education and other sagas, including KISE, NEC, Teacher Service Commission, and other partners that work closely with KICD to define a roadmap that is going to help us build teacher training content for teachers across the country. And this is going to be a 2-year period of content development and testing, where we are seeking to actually digest the recommendations from both documents with all the arms of the Ministry of Education, plus other stakeholders that the KICD may recommend. So that is the next step into moving the conversation to the national level. And we seek to embed the content, teachers training content, into the existing systems. So we are not going to define a new wheel. We are actually going to embed within the capacities that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed explanation. And before you pass over the mic, it's still back to you. So you've shared how you came from Kilifi, Nairobi, and you've been able to do the same piloting in ASAL. So what opportunities and challenges have you found as you try to embed your innovation, that is the Zana innovation, into the system, into the government system? We can look at these in terms of the government structures that exist, maybe into the budget and also the delivery mechanism, rather than you being like a separate entity that you're doing these, another organization comes as a silo. So how has it gone about?
I believe from the conversations that we've had today and yesterday, there is evidence that impact cannot be sustained without collaboration. And that is why we are not working in silo. There are benefits of working together with government that is also coupled with a couple of strains, if I may call them that, because they are not mainly challenges. One of the challenges is that for us to achieve this kind of scaling, to reach 11-point-something million children in Kenya as per the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics 2024, is that it's going to take a long period of implementation constraints. You need to gather people together. You cannot have the conversations throughout, like in an NGO world where you're having two hours conversation. When you want people to really contribute to a framework that will work and that will work to respond to the issues of the children in the country, you need to spend time in a place like this. So it needs kind of longitudinal implementation, longitudinal monitoring from the national level to the county government level to the mid-tier management level, while articulating the outputs and what the teachers are observing, as well as how the children are feeling supported.
Thank you so much. That was really comprehensive, and it's something that also the other grantees that we have and also research can follow. So to you, Ms. Jemima, so at EdLabs, you've been doing your project. So how can you align, or how have you managed to align all your projects, maybe to the, if you have done it, or what you plan to do if you've not done it, so that you're able to align your project to the existing Ministry of Education priorities that you have, to the guidelines that are there, and to the reforms that are happening, from the curriculum to all the other reforms that are happening. So how have you managed to do it as EdLab?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one thing that we were very keen to do, and where I believe also strengthens adoption, is the early engagement of the ministry in the co-design and ownership process of the project. So as I mentioned, when EE4 started, the EEH, the Education Evidence Hub, started out as an idea. It was on a platform where the ministry was present, and the ministry talked about the challenges that they're experiencing, and they were heard. And the stakeholders in that platform thought, why not form a mechanism to address these challenges in a structured manner? And so from that early stage of co-design with the government, being aware of the government function, the government's mandate, we were also able to define the specific roles that MOE would play in this whole process. While this support is coming to the ministry, this is what we also expect the ministry to be doing in terms of taking up that evidence and applying it into key decision points. So in that case, as I will say, while the EEH is now anchored on the NESEP and is operational through the Directorate of Chemis, but the result of that came from several iterations with the Ministry of Education, several stakeholders and SAGAs, from when that idea was conceptualized to how it was designed, and now that it's being implemented through the Ministry of Education. The other point was taking note of demand-driven support. Where are the gaps? So that this support is very targeted to the actual need of the policymaker. If the policymaker says, I need more support in strengthening a data quality area, then that is exactly where you channel all the efforts. If the policymaker says, we need synthesized evidence that I can relate to, that translates into actual strategies or ways of improving programs, then that is exactly where you give the support. So the Evidence Hub is very flexible in that manner, that it will give the support based on the demand. And then the other point that I can talk about is alignment with the ecosystem partners. I mentioned that there are several partners involved, while the Evidence Hub is situated within the Ministry of Education. And when I say Ministry of Education, the SAGAs are also involved because they were part of these conversations from the get-go. But the unit has to be hosted somewhere. So the ecosystem means we have academia in the space generating the evidence. We have the implementing partners who implement these programs, and they're able to collect field data and say, this is what is happening. So the whole ecosystem and coordinating with them is very important in terms of mobilizing the technical assistance that is needed, mobilizing the resources that is needed, but also putting on a joint effort in making sure that the evidence and data is actually resulting in improved programs and policies at scale. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that point on demand-driven kind of support, we've seen it also working for the KICS 19 Hub, where the demand comes from the countries and then we are able to fulfill it. So this helps to also align your priorities with the countries. So we will move on to the last point, and this one we would love to learn from your experience. So maybe we can start with you, Ms. Jemima, since you're holding the mic. What would you say has been the most important thing when you're engaging with the ministry? Like, what has been the importance of engaging with the Ministry of Education and also having all these key players in your project at a very early stage, maybe during the formulation stage of your project and as you're conceptualizing on it, and how has this helped when it comes to scaling and also uptake of the evidence that comes from the project?
Yeah, so one of the lessons we've picked along the way is that early engagement shapes what is built, and it also determines the level of buy-in that you get for the project, but also the findings, and even how it is implemented to the level where we are able to see the expected outcome. So that early engagement and engaging the ministry at different levels, because as much as we're talking about the decision makers, who informs the decision makers? They are the technical teams who are actually the anchor of the work that they do. They understand what we are reporting. When we say statistics here, the technical teams really understand, and that the people who carry the work forward even amidst the challenges that we experience, like transitions that happen quite often in government. But when the technical teams are involved, I believe they're the main champions of the work. They're the people who carry forward the work forward to say, this is where we are and this is where we need to go. And at that level, we are also to distribute the uptake at those different levels. The other point is the consistency in multi-stakeholder coordination. And I think this prevents duplication. I remember Martha talking about the coalition, which is very open as a platform for people to come and share, what are you doing? So we want to understand who is doing what, where, and then who can plug into what, so that there's no duplication happening, but it also increases uptake and builds institutional trust with organizations that we work together with.
Thank you so much. We come back to you, Ms. Beatrice, on the same question. You've had the two phases where you did the first piloting in Kilifi and Nairobi, and then you did it again in the ASALs. So as you were able to engage the ministries in these two levels, so what would you say has been the importance of having the ministry come on board at that early stage, and how has this helped in scaling of the innovation?
Thank you. We learned at a very early age to engage the government. There is no scaling without government. So regardless of how good your work is, you cannot scale if you do not have your own institutions. Listen, because most of these people that are coming from government, they are technical experts, they have the history, they have the reasons why things are as they are. But also be transparent in processes, be transparent in your funder conversations, be transparent in your budget. I know you may not be able to say how much you're earning as Beatrice, as an ED, but be transparent about the activities and the commitments and the expectations of funders pertaining that work. Involve government in advisory groups. That way, when things are working, they are present. When things are not working, they are present, and you're able to unplug. Also with government, I like engaging, advising, especially non-governmental organizations, to have the end user in mind. So that every time there are challenges, the children you saw rolling the mitungis, the yellow containers in the video, are ringing in your mind. So every time you have something that is pushing you to keep going even when the challenges exist. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that part of involving the government in advisory committees, we don't just go to them for rubber stamps and say we've come up with these, so please just rubber stamp. So having the government present in these innovations and projects is really key. So you can see that from the discussion, from what the panelists have shared, is that evidence alone is not enough. We already have the evidence, but scaling is where we get the impact. Embedding this into the system is where we get the impact. And this requires a lot of government ownership. And this is by what they've mentioned, engaging them early in our project, being part of these advisory committees. We've been told about transparency, and also having strong partnerships. Look at people who are around you, the thematic area, people who can contribute to our project. And of importance, we need sustainable funding for most of these impact and most of these innovations. We need sustainable funding. And lastly, continuous learning. Learning is a process. So as you start the first step of the project, you might have envisioned a lot, but as you go, you keep changing and adapting to the context and also learning. So thank you so much to our panelists today and also to our listeners. And we appreciate this conversation, and we look forward to continuing to scale all these innovations that we have brought through our evidence. So thank you so much, and over to you, Ms. Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wangui and our panelists, for that very good discussion on how we can use evidence with real examples. Let's appreciate them once more. So as we come to the close of the day, I would like to invite Dr. Othiambo for a few minutes just to share the roadmap for tomorrow's session on structured policy labs, so that even as we go, we can continue to ponder about the policy labs, and so that we could also be able to finish early tomorrow. Thank you. Dr. Odhiambo is from KIPRA, in charge of policy.
So thank you very much, colleagues. So as you've heard, my name is Dr. Joab Odhiambo from KIPRA, as a principal policy analyst. Now, I have to commend the two speakers who have just left, especially Madam British. You know, when she started mentioning the word RCTs, I was like, coming home, then boom, things changed, okay? But I'm not here because now we want to take you. In the morning, people have been talking about diagnosis, okay? From evidence, okay? And most are teacher, and when you're teaching early childhood education and adults, I don't want to say adult education, are almost the same. And since we have so many teachers here, we cannot afford to live without a homework, isn't it? And that's why we are here. So teachers, we are going to give you a homework. And that's why we are taking you to what we call policy labs. Now, we need to understand what is policy, because we've been talking about from evidence. I think they have discussed from evidence to policy. So we just want to paint you a little bit to tell you what happens in this kitchen once you get to the kitchen called policy. What do you do in this policy kitchen? And that is what we call the policy. So I'm privileged tomorrow we'll have what we call structured policy labs. And of course, this is going to be divided into 5 thematic areas. And as you can see, the 5 thematic areas is teacher, policy, and workforce. This will be the principal that will lead this team is Dr. Ruben Tamburi. I think this is the director who did this. Then there is also another thematic, foundational learning. So, just go back so that I explain as you move. Just go back. Now, as you can see, these are members distributed. So I think probably we'll have to post this in the group, okay? So that we know where members are. You are the leader, okay? So I don't know whether you will have a small kamkunji to have these members. Yes. Then we can have that conversation. Guide you on exactly what, if you once you get into the policy kitchen, what are the things you're going to look for. If you're going to cook, you must have source of fires. You must have a recipe. So we'll look at some of the things so that each of these food we are going to in teacher, policy, and workforce. These are the members. Next one. But we will post this because I see members also have left. So this should be posted in the group too so that members understand. This is data and governance. The leader here will be Frederick Mujumba. These are the members. All right. Can go to the next one. Foundational learning. This will be led by Mr. Stephen Barongo. So they will set up. Then there is gender and inclusion. This will be led by Dr. Kennedy Gishoi. And then lastly, we'll have system resilience, which will be led by Ms. Anne Gashoy. So in these groups, when you get into this kitchen called policy, you know, at Skipra, our tagline is always, if you read, thinking policy together, okay? And as a policy analyst, you need to ask questions, think through this evidence. What is causing this evidence, okay? So personally, I'm a data scientist, okay? But there's a way they baptize you so that you become a policy analyst, okay? You have to think through what is causing this evidence. So one question that you must ask yourself, what is the key issue from the evidence? So that will be a marking, a marking scheme. So as we come to plenary, these are the things that we will be looking for. Number one, what, so team leaders, make sure you read this. What is the key issue? That's number one. This key issue must be backed with what? Evidence. We'll be talking about evidence. So that it doesn't become politics. You know, just guesswork. In policy, there's not guesswork. There has to be evidence. What is the key issue? What is causing it? That is a mother marking scheme. So we have to take. Now, remember, a policy is a statement of intent. Probably at the institutional level, you have tried this, it's not working. You need to change something. You already have the evidence. You already know what is causing it. Then you go and look at what you have about the issues, asal, okay? Some people don't want to. And I think TSC made some even policy recommendation that there are some people in certain areas, for example, the entry level, that is a legal, where other parts, for you to become a teacher, you must have a C+ in the 2 key subjects, isn't it? What about if you bring a policy issue, which we learned? Remember, you first develop a policy is what to be made a law, okay? Yes. For example, those areas we talk about, less lower their subject areas to, for example, C. What will calls for a policy, for example. So if you look at that issue, for example, in shortage, go and follow now the markings in what is a key issue. There has to be evidence on it. What is causing it? Is there a gap in the existing policy? And what are the practical recommendations are you going to have? If it is about teacher motivation and retention, I think most of us were talking about former teacher. What happened? You were teachers and somehow we were baptized on the way to, from Saul to Paul. If it is about professional development, is there an issue there? They are now talking about CBE teaching readiness, okay? Which is something that already exists. And I think some of us who have children who is taking through this, there are some drawings which are not, okay? Some of the issues, for example, we are talking about. So we can go and address those. If it is about staffing challenges, for example, in ASA. So I want you to go, those are some of the issues that you can talk about. You can go and brainstorm because we are going to talk about thinking, okay? Those are just some of the issues that I was able to come up. Then the question is, what reforms do you need to build, for example, a responsive teaching workforce? That can be a policy question that we are going to kitchen to cook. What reforms do we need, for example, to build a responsive teaching workforce? So I think other groups can follow that template. Then we can have a discussion. Then the members of the group, because you are the chair, you'll be the chairing the group. Then we can have a small write-up, which will be presented tomorrow.
Recording in progress.
For compiling and also for communicating. I'm very sure with that, I think we would have at least given you an idea on how to get into policy kitchen and prepare a small meal, okay, which you can present to your guest. Thank you, unless somebody has a question. So those are the groups that we have, and we will have this discussion tomorrow. Thank you.
So, hello, Mwalimu. I have a big question. I haven't seen my name there. Should I take a morning nap?
We are sincerely apology. We are talking about inclusiveness, okay? We're talking about inclusiveness, and that is really apologies. You can see me after this, where we'll add you into my group. I don't know, I saw my name somewhere. I mean, data governance. But I think you can work well. I saw something on inclusivity. So, teacher, what was? All right, we'll put you there. We'll put you there. Put your tape number 15 there. So, unless somebody has got a question, then I can take the mic back to the MC.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Joab, for taking us through that. You have already made policy look easy, and I believe that tomorrow morning we'll begin on light footing on the structured labs. I don't want to take any more of your time, but really to thank you for being very patient throughout the day. I know we are very tired, but I believe that you will be able to have a good rest. And then we meet tomorrow morning at 8. I want to ask Margaret to come and give us a closing prayer, and then we can adjourn.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Anne. Wow, it's the end of the day. I feel like the mathematics teacher who has the last lesson of the day. So I want to request that we all be upstanding and we can say we are happy. How many people are happy? I'm happy today, so happy. And you don't say you are happy with a swollen face. And Gashoya. Yeah, I'm happy needs to go with a smiling face. So to simame, you can sing to your neighbor, I'm happy today, so happy. I'm happy, so happy today. So we are happy. Let us pray. Our Father God, we come before you this evening. We want to thank you so very much for the day that we have had. We thank you for every presentation, every presenter, every discussion. Heavenly Father, we thank you. And now, Lord, we call upon your name to give us the strength and the mind to be able to carry forward for implementation the discussions that we hold in the course of this workshop. We may be tired at the end of the day, but we pray, dear Lord, that you will re-energize us tonight, that as we sleep, you give each of us a good night's rest. The Heavenly Father, we will wake up tomorrow morning refreshed and ready to face the day. We thank you for the program that has been set before us, and we ask you, Heavenly Father, these are our plans of tomorrow. Help us to make them come to reality. We pray for all that concerns us, our families that we left behind as we came for this workshop, some near, some far. We commit all of them into your hands. And we pray, dear Lord, that you will quieten all spaces, that we will be able to concentrate and be able to be productive even as we come towards the end of this workshop. Heavenly Father, when we all meet here tomorrow morning, we will be careful to thank you. For we pray all this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ,